I read 3,596 pages in March, spread across 8 books, and that, I can declare, is my best reading month ever. Ever, 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 ever. Hey Crusaders, just a couple of things before I start my wrap up. The first is that I know this is late and I've not been putting up as many videos at the moment, and it's not that I won't want to, I really want to, but some circumstances are stopping me from making videos as much, but I'm tending to get it back on track, and if you could stick with me for now through this little period of time, then I would be really grateful, because I really do want to make the videos and I love making them, and yes, thank you for understanding. And thank you for new people who are subscribing to me, because I passed 300 subscribers and that makes me just, thank you so much. I really will make videos on a regular basis again soon. But anyway, let's get on to what I read in March. So the first thing that I finished reading in March was Rome the Emperor's Spy by MC Scott. According to my little diary, I read the last 223 pages of this book. I have done a review on this book, so I'll link it right now, but basically this is a Rome spy thriller. So if you like the Romans and you like historical fiction and spies, then you might want to check this series out. It's set in 63 AD, so it's the reign of Nero. I gave this book 3 stars, but that doesn't mean that I didn't enjoy it. I thought it was a really fun read, but the writing wasn't quite up to scratch, but I go into more of that in my review, so yes, I read that. Then the next book that I read and stormed through was 11/22/63 by Stephen King. First thing I want to point out is that it's that ridiculous American way of putting the day, month and year, which is stupid because you don't go month, day, year. It makes much more sense to go day, month, year, but you do it this way, Americans, so whatever. So I actually picked this up and read it because the Bookworms Buddy did a read-along of it. I loved participating in that, by the way. I think that made me read this even faster. I'll link Janie's channel down below because I really think that you should check her out. And I really enjoyed doing this readathon with her, and she actually made me discover one of my new favourite books. I immediately put this on my Goodreads favourite shelf because let me just tell you. So Jake is a newly divorced English teacher just living his average feeling life until he finds himself stepping through a portal back in time to 1958. Now Al is there to instruct him on what is going on, and basically this is his portal back to 1958, and every time you go through it you reset the past, kind of. So if you were to go through the portal and change the future and come back, then when you went through it again you'd go back to 1958 and anything that you've changed will have changed back. So it's like a refresh button. Every time you go back through this portal you go back to the same time and the same place in 1958. So the plot of this book is that Jake needs to go through the portal, wait 5 years and stop the assassination of JFK. If you think that sounds like an interesting premise, then pick up this book right now, because Stephen King is one of the most amazing writers ever and he never fails to disappoint me. Everything is on point with him. His plot, his characters, his development. It's a big book, but every single word in this book is needed, and he's just amazing. The way he crafts books and how many books he churns out a year, man. Stephen King, oh, this book. He's so great at building suspense, and there are obviously parts of this book that are just really terrifying, but it's not a thriller. It's not one of his horror books, it's one of his science fiction books. And the last thing I want to say is that most people write a story, Stephen King writes a life. The next book that I picked up was actually on my Kindle, and that was Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I did a review on this too, so I will link it there and I won't talk too much about it. Basically the premise is a society that is split depending on what colour you are. The reds are the lowest colour and they are mining on Mars to make it inhabitable. They are trying to find helium-3, which will help change the air or something sciencey, and so that the golds can come and live on Mars. What they don't realise is that Mars has been inhabited for years, and this is a story about Darrow, a red, who rises and disguises himself as a gold to infiltrate their training school and start a revolution. More thoughts right there. Gave this book 4 stars. The book that I picked up after that was To Rise Again at a Decent Hour by Joshua Ferris. Joshua Ferris. The basic premise is that there is this depressed dentist living his life and wondering about, kind of philosophizing about floss, until one day someone sets up a social media Facebook account in his name, and they start advertising this very little known cult. I gave this book 4 stars, but I know a lot of people who just couldn't stand it. In fact, this book has got a lot of hate, so I think it's a book that you're either going to love or you're going to hate. So a warning to everyone right now is this book is very heavily religious, and I think that's where people split. I think some people think they're just in for a funny book about a 40-year-old guy who's forced into this social media, but no, that's just the beginning. Most of it is about religion. He's definitely suffering from more than depression though. He has some deep-seated emotional issues which are just explored using different religions. In fact, it's all kind of done through his girlfriends, which is interesting because they all were different religions and he seems to fall in love with the religion rather than the girl. It's kind of hard to explain, but if it's something that you're interested in, then you might want to think about picking it up, but obviously. After that, I picked up Casket of Souls by Lynn Llewellyn, and obviously it's the 6th book in the Night Runners series. Night Runners has to happen in a month. I gave it 5 stars. What else? I don't think you can understand how much the Night Runners impacts on my life unless you read it yourself. They're just so fun. I get so sucked in. I actually don't notice that I'm turning the pages and that the pages are going by until I get to the end, and I'm like, what happened? What? This is one of those books that I really don't want to end. I never want a Night Runners book to end, and I always get pretty down after they have. I found that this is actually one of my favourites. It has a lot of noble intrigue and people plotting against each other, and it was kind of like Source Point in that respect, so it's obviously a massive plus in my book. Alec and Cyril were on top form, and this sassy man didn't fail to deliver. After Casket of Souls, I picked up Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte and had my heart ripped out. This is another instant favourite. I've had 2 instant favourite shelf books this month. Jane Eyre went to number 3. It's gone into my top 3 favourite books of all time. What have you done to me, Charlotte Bronte? I always forget when I've not read classics for a while how much I love reading them, how actually easy they read, and the pictures they paint, and how immersive they are, and how you just fall into that time period. Just imagine the Bronte sisters on those isolated moors writing all of these books together. My English teacher actually once said that they were probably all very sexually frustrated, and I think you can tell that in the type of guys they write about. Mr. Rochester has a lot of issues. Jane is such a strong and vivid character. She's a true heroine. She's that really strong character that people should be reading about, and I'm really glad that Jane has now come into my life. Everything was written so well. Her childhood, her friends, the love between young girls, I really loved that. You know, friendships and love and teachers and being taught to be passionate about something and just being true to yourself. All of it is in here. I must have been in the right mood for a brooding gentleman, because my first impression of Mr. Rochester was a fast beating heart. I'm not even sorry. My heart actually sped up when I was reading about him for the first time. What I love the most is that it's not about beautiful people, and I have so many feels about this that I'm going to put it down now and stop talking about it because my heart is hurting. After I finished Jane Eyre, I picked up The Fall of the Kings by Ellen Kushner and Delia Sherman, the 3rd book in the Riverside trio, and I gave it 4 stars. I didn't enjoy it as much as the other 2, but I still really enjoyed it. But this one was really, really weird. And actually, Sarah Smith at the beginning of this book sums it up very well, and I'm just going to read that to you quickly. This book is stunning. It has all the rich, fantastic tapestry of Swords Point, and more depth, more wonder and truth and humanity, and of course, lots of parties and handsome men, and costumes, and scheming, and cutting remarks, and intimate little dinners, and lots of sex. If Oscar Wilde were writing high fantasy, he'd want to write The Fall of the Kings. I just thought that summed it up so well. It's kind of an alternative history. It's set at the university about 60 years after Swords Point. Its cast of characters are scholars. It's all about the history. because years ago kings ruled and wizards ruled at their side, and then the kings fell and the wizards fell with them. And it's about people looking back into history and debating whether the wizards were truly magical or not. And there are two main characters. We've got Theron and we've got Basil, and they are about to replay an ancient ritual without even knowing that they're doing it, and it was so strange, so peculiar. Stags and sex. What I love a lot about this one is it definitely makes an impact with its whole bisexual feel. It makes an impact in the heterosexual fantasy genre, because it's blatantly put in this that the reasons that the wizards were able to control the kings and rule them is because they were having sex with them and dominating them through it. I mean, that's something to write about the history of anywhere. Imagine if our own kings were ruled by court members through sex. Another thing Kushner does so well is the city of Riverside itself. It is so well developed and it changes in each book, changing with the times, but it still manages to keep that dark feel to it. And if you've not picked up Swords Point, then I really recommend that you do. And I'm actually going to do a series discussion on the 3 books, so I'm going to stop talking about this now and talk about it more in my series discussion whenever I do it. I'll never get this wrap up finished if I talk about the books as much as I want to. And the last book that I read in March was A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. This is a story about parallel Londons. Once all the doors were open and you were able to travel between Londons, but then Black London fell and all the doors were shut off. Now only the Antari can travel between parallel Londons, and there are only 2 left. Kell is our main protagonist and the man we follow. He is from Red London, the London where magic is loved and treated properly and everything seems okay. There is also White London, where they have tried to conquer magic and the whole place has become a very, very dark place to live indeed. And there is Grey London, our London, which has no magic. Lila is from Grey London and she is wanting to be a pirate. She's absolutely awesome. She wants to be a pirate. Is in the reign of King George III, by the way, the Mad King, King George III. So it's back in that time. Okay, and Lila pickpockets something very important from Kell, and that's where the adventure starts. I gave this book 3.75 stars. I thought that it was a really fun, really fast-paced book to read. No complaints about that. No complaints when I was reading it. I thought that it was really fun. I thought the world building was good at first, but it could have been expanded more. It wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. The characters were great, but then they didn't develop as much, so I think it had some problems in the development. I think she also missed some chances to explain some things more that could have been explained. I think overall it was good, but it needed more. It just needed more development. It needed more about the background. We didn't know a lot about Black London. I think it would have been nice to know more about Black London. I think it was very plot heavy, but I understand that it wasn't the book for that, and it was a very fast moving book, and that was just the type of book it was. So obviously, you know, nearly 4 stars. I'm not docking it loads of stars for that. April. So far I've read The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins, so I'll have more about that in April, and I'm currently reading Golden Sun by Pierce Brown. I'm planning on finishing the Night Runners series in April with the last book, Shards of Time by Lynn Flewelly. And I'm also planning on continuing with the Rome series by reading the second book, Rome, The Coming of the King. So yes, carrying on with some series. So that is it for me for March, and I will end this right here before it gets too long. If you've enjoyed this video, then please like a comment about any of the books or just want a general chat, and subscribe and things like that. Anyway, yes, thank you guys. See you soon. Look in the shadows.